Oh my God, one is thirsty in the desert and what to drink but Coke.
Hello everyone, welcome to What the Theory with Joel. I'm Joel, and as promised, today's episode is going to be about our favorite Slovenian philosopher, Slavoj Žižek. If you haven't watched it yet, please go and watch the previous episode on the subtlety of ideology. I was wearing shades in that one, and I think I looked cool. Alan, didn't I look cool? It was the location. Hey, power's gone. Have you seen what you've done? How did that? Anyway, that's umeme. What can I say? Yeah, so today's episode is going to be all about a book called The Sublime Object of Ideology. But before I get into that, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been following, commenting, particularly on Instagram, and even on some of the podcasts. Sometimes, you know, the guys who are on audio, I sometimes forget, but I love you too. I love you very much as anyone can love an anonymous figure. I love you very much. One thing, I think we're going to have one more PPJ episode. P&P have tentatively agreed, so we're going to be putting out a small ask for you guys to send us questions so that we do some, you know, audience requested things, because we're on YouTube and I've got to do YouTube things, and I really enjoy doing YouTube things. Can you tell? I really love it. It's all fantastic. You're going to have a thumbnail that's like, ooh, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, but that's just for later. So watch out for PPJ. Those of you who meet me in town and say, when is PPJ coming? That's what the person sounded like. When is PPJ coming? We're going to be putting it out pretty soon. So watch out for that. Today, Sublime Object of Ideology. Why am I talking about this? This book is one that I first read many years ago, and I had no idea what it was talking about. Before I get into it, I wanted to break down something that I was talking to a friend of mine about, and he was asking why I spend so much time thinking about philosophy. And, you know, I think to correct the apprehension that many people have about it, like, there's that very silly approach of like, oh, is the chair really there? What does it mean for a thing to be there? Do we really have free will? You know, there's that version where you just think you can throw up a question and play with language, and then you think you're doing philosophy. That's a facsimile of something that is much deeper. Let's say there was a comet coming to hit the Earth. At that point, when you have a real problem, something that's immediate, you don't need philosophers. You need scientists, you need engineers, you need people who are going to fix the thing, because we know the contours of the issue. We all know what, you know, the word freedom means, right? You say, yeah, I want to be free. Where philosophy comes in is when they say, what does it mean for you to be free? When you say free and I say free, are we using the same word? Is it freedom to do something or freedom from something? The goal of real philosophy is to reframe the way we see the world. It's to say, are we asking the right questions? It's not about giving you answers. So the kinds of books I tend to despise, maybe despise is the wrong word, but find they're a little bit lukewarm, are those that postulate to give you a normative view of things, to instruct you in a way of how you're supposed to live. Telling you do this and your life will be fantastic. That is pure ideology. And that's why we're going to be discussing it today, because that book was the first one that showed me what ideology actually means. I'm trusting a lot in Alan to be able to insert here a clip from the movie They Live. So if he has done it correctly, right now, I've done this and the movie They Live has come across. Right.
Do it again.
I'm giving you a choice. Either put on these glasses or start eating that trash can.
I already am eating from the trash can all the time. The name of this trash can is ideology. The material force of ideology makes me not see what I'm effectively eating. It's not only our reality which enslaves us. The tragedy of our predicament when we are within ideology is that when we think that we escape it into our dreams, at that point we are within ideology.
in the movie they live. This particular scene, you'll see the guy who's being forced to put on those glasses that allow you to look at billboards and see what the secret message is behind them. So when you look at something that's like, come for a vacation, it's when he puts on the glasses, it's sort of saying, spend money so that you can have happiness. Or when you look at an ad for Coca-Cola, it's basically telling you to obey your thirst, and then he puts it on and it says, obey your thirst. Coca-Cola turned out to be the only product that's actually telling you what you're supposed to be doing. But if you think about it, typically when you think of ideologies, like let's say you're deep into a religious ideology or you're deep into a certain political ideology, if you're trying to get that person to see things and see reality, you would think that they would have to take the glasses off. They would have to take the blinders by which they see life off. Or like in The Matrix, you wake up and suddenly see reality, like the shades fall from your eyes. But it's actually the opposite in this movie, that you have to actually put on certain glasses so that you can see the world differently. Ideology is not in your head per se, it is in the everyday stuff that you do. And that's the main point behind the sublime object of ideology. So today I'm going to describe the 3 aspects of the sublime object of ideology and hopefully get you to buy the book. First word is sublime, second object, and then ideology. So we'll start with the sublime. And I want to read you a quote from Slavoj Žižek on that. The sublime object is an object which cannot be approached too closely. If we get too near it, it loses its sublime features and becomes an ordinary, vulgar object. And then you have Jacques Lacan. It says, the sublime is the experience of the real, of something that is beyond our comprehension and control. It is a kind of jouissance, a paradoxical pleasure that is mixed with pain. All right, what the hell does all that mean? So when I think of something that's sublime, I think of it as beyond, transcending our own understanding. Think of like a large ocean, or if you're standing in front of a mountain and you feel that kind of awe. But the awe is always mixed with a sort of a failure to fully grasp what you're talking about. So sublimity could be found, yes, in great natural features, but it could also be described in something like love. I mean, if you were to give all the reasons you love somebody, that would be a definition of how you don't love them. There has to be some excess that is beyond rationality, that is beyond reason. And that failure within reason is what makes something sublime. And for Slavoj, when he talks about the sublime object is an object which cannot be approached too closely, and if we get too near it, it loses its sublime features and becomes an ordinary, vulgar object. The first thing I had to think about was money. So if you think about money, there's a very pedantic point that you can make, that money is just a metal coin. It is something that is agreed upon by fiat, and it has no intrinsic value. If you get a 50,000 shilling note, it is worth a lot. It can buy you goods and services, but the paper itself is not worth anything. So there is some sublimity within it, although it is an ordinary object. And the first part of the book is talking about before you think of the great beyond, we think of the supernatural, we think of things that are beyond this world. The connection point, the quilting point, comes when we can combine the things that are transcendent with the things that are below. An example is, I made a joke on Twitter, which I think people took terribly, but it was more about the first time I went to Catholic Mass, and I had the priest say something along the lines of, now we're going to have Holy Communion, and we're going to, pray for the host, which is the piece of bread. And at the point after they've made the prayer and given the thanks, he said that this is now literally the body, the flesh of Jesus Christ. And, if you've got a Muslim friend or someone who's in a different religion who doesn't believe in the Son of God having come to earth, it's a weird thing to say that somebody was both man and God at the same time, because man represents filth and carnality and flesh, and God is beyond, is spiritual. And how can something be both spiritual and perfect and also be human at the same time? Well, that's the same conundrum when you think of a sublime object like money. It is in the one instance a very powerful guide. It's the thing that motivates a lot of what we do. People with a lot of money have control, power. We heap esteem upon them for whatever reason. I mean, look at Elon Musk. The fact that he's super wealthy for the longest time allowed him to coast on people thinking that he was a complete genius, simply because he's simply a very rich person. Now, if you turn that to the other sense and say, but what is money? It's actually just a mode of relation. It is a belief. If I don't believe something has value, it no longer has value. So our collective agreement on how money works keeps it sustained. Now, the fact that if you could list out all the material aspects of money, it still wouldn't prevent you from participating. You bear witness every time you make a purchase, every time you sign a contract, every time you understand that you have something of value when you have cash in your pocket. You are bearing witness to the fact that there is a sublime object that is sitting in your pocket. So that is what the sublime is. It is a sort of physical manifestation of the real. And let me maybe explain what the real is at this point. I think we'll put up the triad of the way the psychic structure is. So in psychoanalysis, the idea of the mind is that it is structured in three registers. That is the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. So the imaginary is just pictures. It's the way, you see an immediate sensation in the world. It's the way we observe objects, the way we see ourselves. It's when we recognize ourselves in the mirror. And when we fantasize, we start to see ourselves alongside other objects in the world. When you're being advertised to, you're being provided images, and you sort of project yourself into those images. Me in a nice car, me in an office, me, as a celebrity, whatever the case may be. So that is the imaginary. Then you have the symbolic. That's more along the lines of, the signs and symbols and what they mean in social relations. So someone, say, having a MacBook means that, they're supposed to be cool, or in a cult, it depends. If you're wearing Jordans, for instance, it's sort of a symbol that, you're Team Jordan, or like you want class, and somehow you're going to be able to fly like Mike. So that's the symbolic register. It's about the way we represent things and what they mean. It's that whatever you're looking at doesn't have an immediate presence. Or when you look at language, when you look at words, they allow you to think of other objects. So that's the symbolic register. Now, the real is what resists symbolization. You can't talk about the real because it's not a material force. It is an imagination of what is the excess after you look at our perception, if our perception breaks down. So if you ask the question, this shirt is black, right? Does black look the same way for you as it does for me? Maybe. But at least when we're talking, I don't need to look into your mind and see that the very same color you're referring to as black is the one that I'm referring to, as long as it's being able to allow us to be functional, as long as we can reference things and get things moving. You experience the real when there's a breakdown in symbolization. The closest is when you experience trauma. And I don't know if you've been with someone who's gone through incredible trauma. Like, the meaning of the world breaks down. The ability to access reality is destroyed. So the real is what, is sort of an excess. And the idea that Lacan has is that because we live in civilization, because we are, from a very young age, we see ourselves in the mirror, we understand that, hey, that's me, that's the person they call Joel. And in my feeling, in my internal subjectivity, I feel like I'm always transforming, but to the world, I look like the same thing. I've been called Joel ever since I was 5 years old, and I'm going to be called Joel when I die. But there have been changes happening. So there's a bit of a struggle between the objective image that I portray and how I feel inside. There's always that gap. Now, within that gap, there is almost a feeling that I lost something. Let me read this for you. It probably will bring out the point much more clearly than I can right now. Oh no, it's not here. I don't have it. I'll just have to speak it from memory. Now, the idea is that we feel like we've lost something. In religious discussions, we feel like at some point we're in the Garden of Eden, everything was perfect, we sinned, and so we obtained death. So we lost our eternal nature, and that's something that we can revive through our belief in God or through our, practicing the right kinds of rituals. It's something that can be regained. But in psychoanalysis, it's that is a misrecognition. We haven't lost anything. Through feeling that gap, it seems as though that prohibition, the fact that I cannot, at any point be 100% the ideal image that I see in the mirror, that there is always a gap between how I feel subjectively and how the world sees me or how I project myself. Because there's always that gap, it feels like I've lost something. But in actual fact, it means I am lacking something. And that lack, that absence, that void is what allows human beings as subjects to change. It's what allows us to have different ideologies. It's what allows us to get enlightened. It's what allows us to get, sort of stupefied by different items. It's what allows us to, go through all kinds of different emotional states. It's because we have that gap and we're never foreclosed. If you were to foreclose that gap, you would either become a pervert or a psychotic person. I use perversion in the strictly formal sense, not the sense that this guy is looking at also those perverts. But you close a gap. And the definition of a pervert is they know fully what they're doing and they completely are ready to go all the way to the end. And I want to mention it in the form of fantasy. Now, this might get me off. I don't know how. We've gone past 10 minutes, so I can say this on YouTube. I've noticed on certain adult websites that there are different categories of things people like watching. And the one that I've noticed that people like watching that is a bit is incest. Incest category. Brother, sister, stepmom. Look at this guy shrugging. Yeah, and people are watching it. So if you're a very religious person, at least at some point I thought that was damnation, that is complete perversion, that the person who's watching that or who's fantasizing about that is secretly trying to go and act it out. But fantasies, by definition, very conservative. It's just a way for you to take the excess that is happening in your mind and sort of give it a release. You're simply watching it because it's prohibited. If they said tomorrow that, hey man, all this stuff you can do at any point in time, I don't think anyone really is going to do it. I don't think anyone who's watching that kind of stuff, maybe there are a few, is actually thinking and pining to go all the way to the end. It's because it's prohibited. It's because prohibition, like I mentioned with, having been kicked out of the Garden of Eden, there's that failure point that creates within us a sort of desire to get what it is that we think we're being prevented from getting. And, you'd call that prohibition, the creation of the lack within us. And that lack forms desire. We desire the things that we don't yet have. It doesn't make sense to desire something you already have. Otherwise, why would you be longing for it? Now, the desire has no shape. And because desire has no shape, that's where the second part of the object comes in. So it was the sublime and then the object. Now, the object here is, from the French, the object cause of desire, not the object of your desire. Now, to separate those two, the object cause of your desire is the limiting factor. It's that thing that makes the thing that you want desirable to you. It is what shapes the fact that you've decided to go for that specific item. If you've been on the dating scene, you find that there are very many good-looking people. There are very many people who have great, awesome attributes, but it's rarely the case that you're going to sit down and start listing and say, well, this one has nice legs, well, this one is very funny, and after the final tabulation, I'm going to go with person X or person Z. It's also why I think in religious debates, it doesn't make sense for someone to try and give you evidence, because you don't sit down and go, well, let's see what the evidence is for Allah, what the evidence is for Vishnu, and then you decide. It only makes sense after you believe. The logic for Christianity makes sense after you believe. That's why it's a step of faith. It's foolishness to those who are perishing. It's foolishness to the people who, try and find a rational, reasonable way for them to get there. The reasons for the belief in the faith only make sense after you're willing to make that leap of faith. When you're standing on the other side, there is no reason that can take you there. Once those reasons start to make sense to you, it means that within your system of belief, you found an opening, you've found a way for you to take a leap. Same thing for love, or same thing for attraction. Often the thing that attracts us to people is, it's not that they are perfect, it's a bit of imperfection in them, some kind of resistance. It also shows up when, people try and play hard to get. Now, if you think about that, if I desire you, why would I want us to play that little game of you're playing hard to get? It's because we understand that chase keeps desire burning. And the insight that the Lacanian psychoanalysts have is that what we desire is not what we think we want, because desire is always shifting. Remember what I said about there's a void within us, there's a certain gap, and we feel that gap as if it's a loss, like a lost object. So young kids, for instance, when they lose, all the time that they had with their mother, they'll have that period where they may, attach themselves to an object, they may start sucking their thumb, they find something to fill that gap, that lack. And all through life, it shifts. It moves either to someone wanting to be a superstar, someone wanting to be a musician. That anxiety has driven to us having lots of great artistic achievements, but it's also caused a lot of heartache. Now, because of that desire, that shift of trying to get to where something is, the object, the sublime object, if you combine the two words, means that there are things in the world that we then imbue with certain qualities that are not necessarily found if you are to list off the characteristics of it. And that's where my lovely Coke comes in. That sentence should never be said anywhere else.
It was already Marx who long ago emphasized that a commodity is never just a simple object that we buy and consume. A commodity is an object full of theological, even metaphysical niceties. Its presence always reflects an invisible transcendence. Coke is the real thing, or Coke, that's it. What is that it, the real thing? It's not just another positive property of Coke, something that can be described or pinpointed through chemical analysis. Is that mysterious something more? Coke is the real thing. So, let's have a drink of Coke. When it's cold, properly served, it has a certain attraction. Coke is the real thing.
So think about Coca-Cola. Right? At the top of this, you saw Slavoj Žižek drinking a Coca-Cola in the desert of the real. And when I think about Coke, there isn't anything super special in this. I mean, it's a fizzy drink. It originally started as a product that was like a cough medicine because it tastes, but a cold Coca-Cola for some reason is attached with being refreshing. Now, if you think about commodities in this world, commodities are promising us not just usefulness, but a certain surplus value. And that surplus value is an excess that speaks to that need for us to, fill a certain gap within our lives. So me drinking Coca-Cola, it sounds silly, but if you look at all the advertisements, everyone is happy, everyone's having a good old time. There's some messaging there that, at least for the moment when you're having the Coca-Cola, everything is going to be fine. That, you're refreshing yourself. I mean, otherwise, when you're drinking water, you don't have the same kind of vibe around it. It's like food that you have at home. No one ever likes the food you have at home. We have chips at home. Yeah, you want to have those. What are the best chips now in Kampala? It used to be chicken tonight chips, but I don't think those are. They were just aromat over that stuff. Like, life was hard. Anyway, that's beside the point. So when you take a sip of a Coke, which I'm going to try and do, and that sound is fantastic. This guy should pay me for ad placement. The first sip is always the best, but I've never drank a full Coca-Cola all the way to the end and enjoyed it. And that's nothing to say about the product. It's just my initial purchase of it, the practices and rituals around it. Every time you're at a party, there's going to be soda. You're going to use it to punch some drinks or whatever the case may be. Once it starts getting warm, it almost turns to, lack of a better term, excrement. It turns into an ordinary thing. It's no longer fantastic. I mean, if you take it out of the bottle and all the marketing and all the things around it and just gave it to someone blind, they'll probably say, yeah, it's all right. I mean, it's fizzy, but it's not, life-changing. But it's sold as happiness. And that's where the sublime object of ideology comes in. So we start with the sublime, something that's transcendent, something that's beyond the characteristics and of the object in question. And then we talk about the object cause of desire. So if this is the object of desire in this question, Coca-Cola, the object cause is that it's going to give me a sense of refreshment. It's going to quench my thirst, which everyone knows is quite silly, because when you drink soda, you get more thirsty. It's not like it's going to make you feel much better. It's not got nutritional value of any kind that's going to be useful for you. I mean, why are we drinking it? It's definitely not for the use value. There has to be some other reason. It's nothing about the characteristics individually of the bottle or of the drink itself. It's something excess as a surplus. Now that surplus, like I was talking about, is pulling your desire. So the object of your desire is this, but the object cause of your desire is, I guess, happiness, fulfillment, whatever the case may be. Now, anyone who's smart enough will say, look, Joel, I don't buy products to try and, quench some existential need. I'm just trying to live, man. I'm just doing things normally. And this is where Žižek's point is of what ideology actually means today. Ideology is not some grand narrative in your brain. It's not some, explicit thing that you're doing. Like Marx and Jesus said at some point, you're doing it, but you don't know that you're doing it. It is in the social relations. It's the way you act. In the last episode, I was talking about how business ontology makes us treat each other like commodities. Even if you love your teammates and you're trying to do the best by them, there is always, a sort of gap there, because you have to treat them as resources. The organization has to treat you as resources. If you can picture someone working in an old school organization, show up on a certain day at this time, you have to check in, your boss is strict and tough, it just underscores what that relationship is. Then you think of maybe working in Silicon Valley or working in a tech startup. Guys are having pizza. Your boss is asking you, hey man, how was your night out with the girlfriend yesterday? Like, it tries to obscure that relationship. And if you're dumb and you fall into it, that's when you push up against the resistance. You'll find that it's the status quo. The form of relations has remained. It's just, the content is changing a little bit. The way it's being administered, the way you're being told, just help us do this work. Slavoj has that joke about what's better, a postmodern father or a very traditional father. A traditional father tells you, you need to go and see your grandmother this weekend, whether you like it or not. So you can keep that resistance within your heart even if you're there. But the other who's telling you, I'm going to be disappointed if you don't show up and see your grandmother. That injunction is a little stronger, because you don't only have to go, but you're being guilted into feeling like you must obey. Now that is an example. We usually use the words of the father or the mother or whatever authority as the superego injunction. So the superego is like how society is supposed to be looking at you. Remember when you look in the mirror and you see an image of yourself, that image and what it relays is not determined by you. Your unconscious is crafted by other people. The things which you think are neurotic, the things that you resist, the reason you don't just walk around naked, the reason all of us change our clothes, we act in certain ways because we exist in a certain fabric, a social fabric. The fact that we think with words, with language, a language that you are not born with, means that part of you is social. The very part of the way you frame life is social, and so that is ideology. Ideology is the ways in which the options, the ideas that are littered around that explain the world to you. If you are, I keep using the religious example because if you think about when in the Bible they saw Jesus resurrected, I didn't know this, but to apocalyptic Jews, they didn't believe that the body had something like a soul that was separate. It just, when you die and come back, it's your body coming back. It's not, some spirit leaving and going to the heavens. That is a later addition, largely from Christianity, which is why they believe that, there's the resurrection of the dead. It's not that you leave your body and then that spiritual substance goes on. You're going to come back and have a body. So that means when they saw Jesus moving, the first thought they would have is, oh, this is the guy, this is an undead person. Whereas if you saw something like that, you might think it's a mirage, you might think you're seeing something because, dead people don't, walk around. You might think of a ghost, you might think of the separation of the two. What I'm saying is those two represent ideologies. They are frames by which whatever you see is then interpolated and given a symbolic meaning. Now, the sublime object of ideology, when you put those three together, ultimately the best example is money. But the other is, like I would like to say, Coca-Cola. And what it represents for us is more than any age where there were multiple ideologies. Right now, the main one is the capitalist ideology. And it's very easy to fall into this, capitalism is to blame for everything. And I don't think that that's true. For all of its merits in terms of production, it has captured something about the human psyche, meaning that we need to be sold back to ourselves who we are. It is the things that we consume that make us who we are. And to me, that's the thing that philosophy has to break. The fact that if we think we've lost something that we can then gain by having a certain job, having the right kind of partner, or consuming the right kind of products, we are becoming the kind of subject that continually needs to always consume. You'll always need the newest iPhone. You'll always need the newest product. And to you, it won't ever feel like you need that new thing because, yeah, it's just something that you do. It's not on the level of need, of an emotional need. It is in the everyday, the stuff that doesn't have any friction that pushes up against you. Why should you have a car? Why should you live in a certain type of place? Like, your desires are shaped by the kind of the thoughts, the kind of structures that are around you. And without questioning those things, you never fully know whether you're putting on the right shades or not. And the last point I'll put to this is, if you watch the movie They Live by John Carpenter, I highly recommend you watch it. The difference between that movie and The Matrix, for instance, is The Matrix is the kind of movie that The Matrix would have made about itself. The fact that you could, I can escape and leave, and that's my interpretation of the end, that they never really left. It was just part of the system, that there was some resistance in human beings that felt like, we need to feel like, I've received the truth. That's where conspiracy theories come from. That's why people are always trying to find the truth behind something. And often, the most ideological position is to sell you that there is no ideological position. I'm very clearly telling you a certain kind of ideology. And the ideology I'm selling is that we are swimming in a sort of way in which capital comes before labor. And everything else that we say, well, money doesn't really matter, human beings ultimately are the most important thing. Just look at the world. We live in a place where a global system can allow for the Congo to be in the state of disrepute that it's been in for such a long time, and yet they provide us with essential minerals. Clearly, in our actions, we're showing what we truly believe. So again, I would recommend that you read the book, The Sublime Object of Ideology. Tell me what you think. If you enjoy it, the other book is The Ticklish Subject. And ultimately, as I drink this Coca-Cola, I just want to give you guys, the assurances that even as I go through terrible times, as I suffer, as the year is coming to the end, and it's taking a toll on me, at least I can comfort myself in the knowledge that I can have a sip of Coke. And in that moment, at least, all my pain is gone. The slow realization that what I've taken is actually of no nutritional value. It's quite flat. The bubbles are disappearing, and the ennui is coming back slowly, wondering if I'll ever become who I'm supposed to be, if I'm just wasting time talking to myself on this show or not. But at least for a moment, there was some jouissance, and I got what I lost. And yeah, that's what the sublime object of ideology is all about. Thank you. Boom! At the end, you play the song. I like to buy the world and keep it company. I like to